Are you ready to step into a world of ghosts, darkness, and true terror? If you love real horror stories, chilling mysteries, and spine-tingling suspense, then subscribe to The Untold Persona. Now, we bring you true paranormal tales from America. Creepy, intense, and hauntingly unforgettable. Each episode will drag you deeper into the shadows, where fear whispers and silence screams. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story from the other side. The Untold Persona, where the dead still speak. Scary deep woods stories. The haunted apartment that never sleeps. I moved into the old neighborhood on a rainy Thursday afternoon, the kind of relentless drizzle that soaks your bones and blurs the skyline. New York City, with all its noise and concrete charm, had never felt so muted. I had just gotten out of a bad breakup and needed a fresh start, so when I found the listing for a rent-controlled studio in a brownstone off 93rd Street, I didn't ask questions. The price was suspiciously low, but the landlord seemed eager to get it off his hands. "It's a quiet building," he said, avoiding my gaze. "Good neighbors. Just don't stare too long at the building across the street." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. The apartment was small but cozy, with creaky floorboards and a radiator that hissed like a dying snake. I didn't mind. It felt like mine. The first night, I unpacked in silence. No TV yet, no internet. Just the rain tapping on the window and the occasional sound of tires sloshing through puddles. That's when I noticed it. The apartment across the street, fourth floor, middle window. The light was on. I thought nothing of it. Someone probably reading, or maybe couldn't sleep. But it stayed on all night, and the next, and the next. After a week, curiosity took root. I started watching it before bed, sometimes with the lights off in my own apartment, trying to see if the occupant moved. But the window remained eerily still. Curtains drawn back, a dim yellow glow seeping into the street. No shadows moved, no figures passed. It just glowed, a beacon in the dark. My neighbor on the floor below, Mrs. Keene, an elderly widow who kept a dozen cats and always smelled of lavender, caught me staring one evening. "You're watching that place?" she asked, her voice cracking with age. I shrugged, just wondering who lives there. "Lights always on." Her face darkened. "No one's lived there in years, not since the accidents." She shuffled off before I could ask more. That night I stayed up, not drinking, not reading, just watching. Midnight passed, then 1, then 2. The light never flickered. Around 3, my eyes heavy with exhaustion, I thought I saw a movement. Just a flicker, a shadow crossing the window. I sat upright, heart pounding. But it was gone. I stared harder, barely blinking. Nothing, just the same yellow light. The next morning I went to the deli on the corner and asked the cashier, a college kid with a nose ring, about the building across the street. He chuckled nervously. "Yeah, man. Everyone knows that place. Some say it's haunted. You're not the first to ask." I pressed him, but he just shook his head. "People see stuff. Lights that don't turn off. Shadows, but there's no one listed on the lease. It's been vacant since before I was born." Back in my apartment, I tried to focus on work, but my eyes kept drifting to the window. That light, constant, unwavering, it was getting under my skin. I set up a camera, facing the window, and hit record. I went about my day, tried to ignore the sense of unease. That night I reviewed the footage. Hours of static city noise, cars passing, sirens wailing, and that light. But around 2:47 a.m., the video glitched. Just for a moment, a single frame. I paused it. There in the window was a figure, pale, thin, eyes like black pits, staring straight at my camera. I dropped the phone. My hands trembled. When I picked it up again, the image was gone. The frame had skipped. I tried rewinding, pausing, slowing down. Nothing. Just the empty, glowing window. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't turn off my own lights. And the next day, I bought blackout curtains. But it didn't help. I still felt it watching me, like the glow burned through the fabric, through the walls, into my thoughts. Then came the dreams. always the same. I'm in a dark hallway, the walls pulsing like they're alive, the light at the end growing brighter and brighter until it's blinding. And then I see it, the figure, standing in the window, smiling, waving, calling me closer. By the fourth week, I was barely sleeping. My body was in my apartment, but my mind lived in that fourth floor window. I avoided mirrors. I couldn't stand seeing how hollow and gray my own face had become. And worse, I started to see things during the day. Not full apparitions, no. Just impressions. A glimpse of something standing at the end of the hallway. A soft knock on my bathroom mirror when I hadn't touched it. Whispers from the radiator that didn't sound like steam anymore. I told myself it was sleep deprivation, stress, anything but real. Until the night the phone rang. It was 3:07 a.m. The screen flashed. Unknown caller. I hesitated. The phone kept ringing. I picked it up and said, "Hello?" Silence. Not static, not breathing, just empty, suffocating silence. Then, click. The call ended. My eyes darted to the window across the street. The light was still on, but now the curtain had moved, just slightly, enough to notice, enough to send a pulse of dread into my stomach. Someone had shifted it. Someone had watched me answer that call. The next morning, I marched to the building. I didn't knock. I buzzed random numbers until someone let me in. The lobby was dusty and forgotten, the walls yellowed with age and moisture. I climbed the stairs to the fourth floor, every creak echoing in the stale air. Apartment 4B, the glowing window. I stood in front of the door, fist raised. My heart slammed against my ribs. But before I could knock, the door creaked open. No one was inside. I should have left, but I stepped in. The apartment smelled like mildew and rot. The floor was warped as if it had been soaked for years. The walls were yellow, not painted but stained from the inside. The only furniture was a single armchair facing the window. And the light, the source of that eternal glow? A lamp, old, rusted, with no bulb. Just the glow. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't electricity. It was light, yes, but it pulsed almost like a heartbeat. I reached out and touched the lamp. Cold. But as soon as my fingers brushed the metal, I heard a whisper. "You see it now." I stumbled back, heart jackhammering in my chest. The whisper hadn't come from the lamp. It came from behind me. I turned, ready to run, but the door was gone. There was only wall. Seamless, mold-streaked wall. I screamed, hit the wall, kicked it. Nothing. I turned back to the lamp, and the armchair was now occupied. It was the figure, thin, pale, black eyes like endless wells. It opened its mouth, too wide, too long, and from it came the sound of static, of sirens, of my name. I collapsed. Everything went dark. I woke up in my bed. My phone said it was noon. Sunlight streamed in. Had I dreamed it? Imagined the whole thing? But then I noticed my shoes. They were still muddy. My hands smelled like mold. And on my palm, in faint, bruised lettering, were the words, "Come back tonight." Later that evening, the lights in my apartment began to flicker. The temperature dropped even though the radiator hissed red hot. My phone buzzed with static and died despite being at full charge. I sat on my bed holding the blackout curtain tight, trying not to look, but the light across the street bled through. I checked the camera footage again, the one I'd set to auto-record every night. At exactly 2:47 a.m., the video turned black. No transition, just pitch dark for 3 minutes. When the feed resumed, it wasn't showing the window anymore. It was showing me, sleeping, from the foot of my bed. I stared in horror. The angle shifted, closer to my face. My mouth hung open in sleep, and behind me in the video, the figure stood, just inches from my bed. I scrambled to check the camera physically. How had it moved? It hadn't. It still pointed at the window. I checked the footage again. This time, nothing. Back to normal. Had I hallucinated? Was I losing my mind? I couldn't stay in the apartment. I packed a bag and ran to the hallway. But the hallway wasn't right. The walls seemed longer, the light dimmer. The exit door at the end flickered like it was on an old VHS tape. And then the elevator dinged, slowly opened. Inside stood the figure. It didn't move, just stared. I ran back inside, locked every bolt, turned on every light, and that's when I saw it on the inside of my window. Written in the same bruised script, "Come back tonight." I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Not after what I saw in that video. Not after the hallway stretched like a rubber band around me. Not after the elevator doors open, and that thing, the figure, stood inside like it had always belonged there. My apartment, once my sanctuary, had become a prison of shadows and whispers. The lights flickered even though every bulb was new. Every switch was steady. The radiator hissed like it was screaming under pressure. I stayed crouched in the corner, clutching a kitchen knife even though I knew it wouldn't help. Knew that whatever was watching me, whatever had followed me back from apartment 4B, wasn't something I could fight. Time melted. Minutes felt like hours. The city outside continued, oblivious, horns honking, dogs barking, people laughing as if they weren't inches away from whatever this was. At exactly 2:47 a.m., the lights shut off completely, not gradually, just gone. Darkness swallowed the room like ink spilling over paper. My phone, useless as ever, buzzed violently once before dying again. And then I heard it. Not a footstep, not a creak, a breath. In my ear, hot and wet and real. I spun around, knife swinging through air. Nothing, but I could feel it. Behind me, inside me. The pressure of being watched so heavy it crushed my lungs. I stumbled toward the window, pulled the blackout curtain aside, and across the street, the light in apartment 4B was no longer alone. Another light had turned on, the one next to it, and in that new window a second figure stood, taller, thinner, its head cocked unnaturally to the side, hands pressed to the glass like it was trying to push through. My knees gave out. I collapsed to the floor, gasping. And then the whisper came again, this time from inside my apartment, from everywhere at once. "You're almost ready." The air turned sour, rotting. I crawled toward the door, tried to unlock it, but the bolts wouldn't turn, as if the metal had fused. I screamed for help, knowing no one would hear. On the wall, my shadow began to twitch. Not my body, just the shadow. It moved out of sync, hands lifting when mine were still. It reached toward the ceiling, toward something I couldn't see. And then it smiled. I could see teeth in my own silhouette. Rows of them. That's when the mirror in the hallway shattered. Not cracked, exploded. Tiny shards rained down, slicing my arm, my face. But I didn't feel pain. I was numb, beyond fear. The fragments shimmered with images not of my apartment, but of a long, endless hallway, of doorways pulsing with light, of versions of me walking deeper and deeper until they vanished. I scrambled back, dragging myself across the floor until I hit the wall. My breathing was ragged, like my lungs couldn't keep up with the terror. And then the radio, the one I hadn't turned on in weeks, clicked to life. Static first, then a voice. My voice. "He's here now. Let him in." I screamed, covered my ears, but the voice didn't stop. It just got louder, layered with others. Dozens, maybe hundreds of whispers, all chanting the same thing. "Let him in. Let him in. Let him in." And the window across the street, apartment 4B, burst into a blinding golden flame. Not fire, not real flame, but a glow so intense it painted my entire apartment gold. And from the light stepped the figure. Not physically, just into my mind, into the room behind my eyes. I saw its memories. 100 years of watching, waiting, calling to tenants across the street. Few ever answered. Fewer survived. But I had seen too much. Touched the lamp, opened the door, crossed the threshold, and now I belonged to the story. The figure kneeled in front of me, not out of respect but mockery. Its eyes were pits of gravity. I fell into them without moving, fell forever. And when I blinked again, I was standing. Not in my apartment, but in 4B, alone, facing the window. Behind me sat an empty armchair. Beside me, a lamp without a bulb, pulsing gently like a living heart. And on the wall, written in blood, were 3 words: "Turn the light." I don't know how long I stood there inside apartment 4B, frozen between thought and madness. But time had lost meaning the moment I crossed that threshold. The air was heavier than anything I had ever felt, like walking through molasses made of static and memory. Every breath I took tasted like old paper and metal, like something ancient had exhaled first and I was stealing the remains. My limbs moved, but not because I wanted them to. I turned in slow, unnatural motion, as though someone else was guiding my joints, my nerves, my will. The room had changed. It no longer looked like the neglected apartment I'd peeked into that first night. It was something older now, stripped of time, dressed in the illusion of familiarity. The wallpaper had peeled away in long, elegant curls, revealing beneath it symbols I didn't recognize, patterns that shifted when I blinked, lines that pulsed like veins. The furniture was wrong, not old but displaced, as if it had been placed by something that had only heard about humans, mimicking a living room from half-remembered fragments. A couch sat too close to the wall, its cushions covered in stitched words in a language I couldn't read. A record player spun on its own, playing a track that wasn't music, but instead a loop of faint crying, like a child trapped in a dream. And in the center of it all, the lamp, that same lamp. No bulb, no cord, just an empty socket, wide and hungry, pulsing softly like it had a heartbeat. I tried to look away, but my eyes betrayed me, drawn to it with the intensity of a magnet pulling iron. It called without sound. I could feel it vibrating in the soft tissue of my skull, like my bones were tuning forks. A voice rose, not external, but inside me. It was mine, and it wasn't. "You've come far," it said, "but far isn't far enough." I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My mouth opened and nothing emerged, not even air. I stumbled backward, desperate to reach the door, but there was no door anymore. Just walls. Endless walls. The apartment had swallowed its exit, turned itself into a maze with no beginning, no end. I turned left and found myself in the same room. I turned right, ran through a hallway and emerged again into the living room. Again, again, again. The dimensions were wrong. I was trapped in a loop. The only thing that remained unchanged was the window. Apartment 4B's cursed, glowing window. I pressed my forehead to the cold glass, desperate to see my own apartment across the street. Some anchor to reality. But it wasn't there. My building was gone. In its place stood an infinite field, gray and lifeless, with twisted trees that grew without branches, only hundreds of reaching fingers. And among them were people, dozens, hundreds, all standing still, all facing me, their eyes empty, their mouths wide open in silent screams. Every one of them had the same face, mine, my reflection, my fate. Behind me the whisper returned, not a word, a hum, software gentle, like a mother rocking a dead child. I turned around slowly, heart hammering, and saw the lamp had changed. It had grown. It now reached the ceiling, tall and thin like a bone stretched beyond what was natural. Its socket glowed, faint but steady, and around it floated fragments of glass, tiny slivers that hovered like stars caught in gravity. They began to swirl slowly, spinning faster with each breath I took, and then they shot toward me, not to hurt, to enter. Each piece pierced my skin, not with pain, but with memories. Not mine, someone else's. I saw a boy in 1952 who entered this room looking for a lost cat. I saw a woman in 1971 who heard the lamp calling through her dreams. I saw a man in 1999 who moved in for cheap rent and vanished 3 days later. I felt what they felt. I watched what they watched. And I screamed what they screamed, but silently, for my mouth no longer belonged to me. And then the room spoke. Not a voice, but the room itself. The creaking floorboards, the hissing walls, the pulsing lamp. It said, "You are the bulb. You are the light. Shine." And the socket opened wider. I couldn't resist. My hand rose against my will, fingers trembling as they reached toward the lamp. I begged my body to stop, begged my legs to run. Nothing moved but that one traitorous hand, lifting like it was being pulled by invisible wires. As my fingers brushed the socket, A bolt of energy, pure liquid memory, surged into me. Not pain, not heat, something older than sensation. I saw time unravel. I saw the first tenant who built this building over sacred ground. I saw rituals buried under foundations, symbols in the pipes, blood in the concrete. I saw the face of the thing that whispered from the other side of the mirror. And it saw me. It smiled, a smile wide enough to split worlds. I collapsed to the floor, eyes burning, mind cracking, heart no longer beating in my chest but from somewhere else. And in that moment of terror and ecstasy, I understood. This wasn't an apartment. This wasn't a haunting. It was a beacon, a doorway, a test, and I had passed. From across the room, the radio came to life again, static giving way to a new voice. Not mine, not anyone's, just a command. Walk into the wall. I stood, legs shaking, tears running down my cheeks. I walked, and the wall welcomed me. It opened like skin beneath a scalpel. I stepped inside, and the world blinked out. I don't know how much time passed after I walked into the wall, if time even exists in that place. There was no sensation of movement, no gravity, no sound. Just the impression of falling inward, endlessly, like sinking into layers of thought rather than space. It wasn't darkness around me, but something worse. An absence of perception, of color, of context. A void so complete it seemed to swallow not just light, but memory and reason. My body dissolved first. I felt my skin peel away gently, not torn or flayed, but unstitched, like it had never belonged to me. My bones followed, not with pain, but with a soft sigh, like they were glad to be done with holding me upright. My mind was the last to go. Not vanish, but fracture. Shatter into floating shards of thought that hovered around me like broken glass in a weightless aquarium. Each fragment held something, an image, a word, a memory, but none of them felt like mine anymore. I tried to speak, to scream, to think, but there was no voice, no self, only awareness. And then, just as I believed I'd been erased entirely, I opened my eyes. I was lying on the floor of apartment 4B, whole, breathing, alive. The room was quiet, untouched, clean even. The warped furniture was gone. The symbols on the wall had disappeared. The lamp sat in the corner, looking perfectly ordinary, like any cheap thrift store piece you'd find in a college dorm. Sunlight poured through the window, warm and natural. For a moment, I dared to hope it had all been a hallucination. Maybe I'd had a breakdown. Maybe I'd passed out and dreamed the whole thing. But then I saw it, etched faintly into the wall above the lamp. A spiral, burned into the plaster, still smoking. And my hand, my right hand was glowing. Faint but visible. Under the skin, veins pulsed with a strange golden light that flickered like static electricity. I ran to the mirror above the sink, heart pounding, and stared into my reflection. Same face, same eyes. But something had changed. My pupils were no longer black. They shimmered like mercury, shifting as if alive. I reached up and touched my cheek, and in that moment, I heard it again. Soft, faint, but undeniable. A whisper. Not from outside, from within. You brought it back. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The room didn't react. It was still calm, eerily normal. But I wasn't. My thoughts raced, colliding with each other. What had I brought back? What had I become? I needed answers. I needed help. But who could I go to? What could I say? Hi. I crossed into a void beyond comprehension, and now my blood glows? I went to the front door, but it was already open. On the floor just outside was a piece of paper, a note, typed, plain font, no name, no heading, just one line. You're not the first, you won't be the last. Beneath it, a set of coordinates. I grabbed the note, heart slamming against my ribs, and checked the coordinates on my phone. They pointed to a place 3 states away. A forest, no buildings nearby, no roads, just wilderness. Something deep inside me, a voice I could no longer ignore, said, "Go." I should have thrown the note away, burned it, walked away from all of it, But I didn't, because even though I was terrified, I couldn't deny the pull, like a magnet or fate. That night I packed a bag, just the essentials: clothes, water, flashlight, compass. I left a note for my job saying I was taking personal time. I didn't explain why. What could I say that wouldn't sound insane? The next morning I left the city. I drove for 12 hours straight. No music, no stops except for gas. Every hour the glow in my hand grew stronger. My skin tingled with energy, as if the thing inside me was getting stronger the closer I got. When I finally reached the forest, it was dusk. The sun hung low over the trees, casting everything in a blood-orange hue. I parked at the trailhead and walked, deeper and deeper, until the path disappeared and I was moving through thick brush, guided only by the coordinates glowing on my phone screen. And then I found it, a clearing, perfectly round. The grass there was scorched black, as if lightning had struck. In the center stood a cabin, weathered, silent, ancient. Its wood was gray with time, its windows covered in sheets of paper filled with the same spirals I had seen in apartment 4B. On the door was a symbol, my symbol, the same one now etched into the skin of my chest, glowing faintly beneath my shirt. I stood there unable to breathe as the door creaked open on its own. Inside I saw candles, hundreds of them, lining the walls, and in the center of the room, a single chair. Sitting in it was a man, or what was left of one. His skin was dry, almost mummified. His eyes were gone, burned out, but his lips moved, slowly, painfully, and I heard the voice not from his mouth, but from everywhere. You've crossed, you've survived, now you must decide. Decide what? I asked, but the words didn't come from my mouth. They formed in my mind, like thoughts not entirely my own. To return, or to remain, to forget, or to awaken. Awaken to what? I asked. The man lifted a hand and pointed toward a mirror nailed to the wall. I walked toward it, slowly, hesitantly. When I looked into it, I didn't see myself. I saw hundreds, no, thousands of faces, all trapped, all screaming, all glowing with the same light that now lived in me. And behind them, the lamp, always the lamp, its socket wide, hungry, waiting. The man behind me whispered one final word: choose. I turned back to him, and he was gone. Just dust on the chair. I was alone, with a choice. But what terrified me most wasn't the decision itself. It was the fact that, deep down, I already knew what I would choose. I stepped out of the cabin with the weight of that unspoken decision crushing me from within, a silent verdict echoing in my bones. The sun had vanished behind the treetops, and the forest seemed to breathe, alive with whispers I couldn't understand, branches rustling in a rhythm too deliberate to be mere wind. I didn't remember walking back to my car. One second I was staring into the mirror filled with countless trapped faces. The next I was gripping my steering wheel, knuckles white, engine humming beneath me like a warning growl. But the coordinates were gone from my phone, erased, like they'd never been there. And yet I still knew the way back, not in miles or landmarks, but in instinct, something ancient now curled up inside me, guiding my senses like a compass wired into my nervous system. As I drove back toward the city, the glow beneath my skin dimmed, retreating like a frightened animal, but never fully gone. I tried to pretend things would return to normal. I told myself that maybe I'd hallucinated everything. Maybe the cabin never existed. Maybe the spirals and the glowing eyes and the whispering void were a symptom of stress, psychosis, a damaged mind. But denial has a short shelf life, because when I got home, the spiral was back, on the wall, etched deeper this time, with something black and tar-like dripping from its center. My lamp stood beside it, untouched, silent, innocent. I turned it off. I unplugged it. I even wrapped it in a blanket and locked it in my closet. But that didn't stop the dreams. Every night I was back in that cabin. The man in the chair was always there, but he never moved, never spoke. And yet the mirror always showed me more faces. Some I recognized, a neighbor, a bus driver, my boss. Others were strangers, But I began to see them on the street during the day. People I'd never noticed before now seemed tethered to me by invisible threads, their movements too synchronized, their stares too long. I'd pass them and feel that faint glow in my chest flicker, reacting to their presence like magnets repelling each other. I started keeping notes, drawings, scribbles I didn't remember making, pages upon pages of spirals, coordinates, names that meant nothing to me until I Googled one of them and discovered it was the name of a woman who'd gone missing 20 years ago. Vanished without a trace. The police report described her last known location as an apartment in a building that had since burned down. Apartment 4B, the same number as mine. My hands began to tremble every time I picked up a pen. I stopped sleeping. I boarded up the closet, threw the lamp into a dumpster 3 blocks away. But the next morning, it was back, sitting on my desk, perfectly centered, plugged in. I couldn't breathe. I left the apartment, checked into a motel, threw my phone in a river, cut off all contact. But the dreams followed, the voices followed, and worse, so did the faces. They were everywhere, on every street corner, in every cafe. People staring just a little too long, blinking a little too slowly. I realized they weren't people anymore. They were marked, like me, chosen. I began to see the signs, the spiral etched on the backs of stop signs, in the foam of my coffee, reflected in car mirrors. I wasn't escaping it. I was sinking deeper. One night I woke up not in the motel bed, but in the middle of a field, barefoot, surrounded by candles. In my hand was a page torn from a journal, my own handwriting, though I didn't remember writing it. It said, Phase 1 complete, integration underway. My skin burned. My heart felt like it had too many beats per minute, like it was struggling to match some alien rhythm. I screamed into the night, but the stars blinked back at me like they understood, like they were waiting. I needed answers, so I went to a library across the state, an old occult archive I'd heard about online, run by a man who claimed to have survived something beyond the veil. I told him my story. I showed him my hand, the glow still pulsing under my skin like a slow heartbeat. He didn't flinch. He didn't even look surprised. Instead, he reached under the desk and pulled out a dusty book, bound in leather, locked with 3 clasps. He undid them slowly and flipped to a marked page. The symbol was there, the spiral. With a name underneath, the infinite eye. He pointed to a line written in Latin and translated it for me. It sees through you to see itself. I asked him what it meant. He said nothing, just closed the book, leaned in, and whispered, "You are the mirror now." I left, ran. I didn't know where to go. My world was unraveling faster than I could hold it together. I didn't trust my thoughts anymore. I didn't trust time. Every day felt like a repetition, a loop trying to disguise itself as progress. I'd look out my window and see the same man walking the same dog at the same moment, every single morning. Sometimes I'd speak a sentence out loud only to hear someone nearby whisper it back before I finished. The walls in my apartment breathed at night. I could hear them exhaling. Then came the symbols, not just on the walls but on my skin. They appeared overnight, pulsing with warmth like fresh scars. Every time I tried to wash them off, I'd black out and wake up somewhere else. An alley, a rooftop, once even inside a stranger's car parked 5 miles from my apartment. I don't know what's happening to me. I don't know who or what I'm becoming, but I do know one thing. The lamp is no longer just an object. It's a doorway, a beacon. It's calling others now. I hear them outside my door sometimes, whispering, scratching, waiting. The mirror in the bathroom shows things that aren't behind me, and the face I see in it isn't always mine. The spiral spins in my dreams, pulling everything into its center, and something waits there. Something hungry. I should run. I should destroy the lamp, burn the apartment, erase every trace of this nightmare. But deep down, I know it's too late. I made my choice back in that cabin. I crossed over, and now there's no going back. Only forward, only deeper, only down. I tried locking the door. I tried boarding the windows. I even sealed the keyhole with wax from a candle I hadn't lit in years, thinking maybe, just maybe, I could stop whatever was clawing at the threshold between this world and the next. But you can't seal away something that's already inside you. It was around 3 in the morning when I heard the first knock. Not on the front door, not on the window, but from inside the mirror. A soft, deliberate tapping, like fingernails against glass. I stared at it from across the room, my breath caught in my throat. Every muscle in my body coiled in terror. The surface of the mirror shimmered faintly, like ripples across water. And then the knock came again. Louder, more insistent. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then I saw it, a face in the mirror, hovering just behind my reflection, peering over my shoulder with eyes that glowed faintly gold, like distant suns. It didn't blink. It didn't move. It just watched me. And the worst part, I recognized it. Not completely, but enough. It looked like me. Aged, distorted, but unmistakably me. My future self, maybe. Or my soul twisted by something far older. I turned away, refusing to look, but the reflection didn't vanish. It stayed imprinted on the inside of my eyelids. I saw it every time I blinked. I could feel it too, like pressure building behind my eyes, like something was trying to pull me through the glass. I grabbed the mirror and threw it to the floor. It didn't break. It just lay there, humming softly like a distant engine, the surface still rippling as though it were made of mercury. That's when I realized I hadn't been alone for a long time. There were others in the apartment now, shadows that moved just out of reach, breaths that didn't belong to me. My reflection began walking on its own, staring at me from behind the glass while my real body stood frozen in place. I watched it smile when I couldn't. I watched it raise its hand and press its palm to the inside of the mirror, leaving behind a smear of black liquid that began to run down the wall like tar. I should have run. I should have smashed every mirror, every screen, every reflective surface. But I didn't. Something held me there. Something curious. Some sick part of me wanted to know what would happen if I touched the glass. I was already losing time. Hours would vanish. I'd find myself in places I didn't remember walking to, having conversations I didn't recall starting. My phone's camera roll began to fill up with photos I hadn't taken. Images of the spiral drawn in dirt, carved into trees, written in blood across bathroom tiles. Sometimes the photos were of me, standing in front of the cabin again, even though I hadn't returned. Not consciously, anyway. One night, I opened my eyes and found myself standing in the street outside my apartment, barefoot, holding the lamp in both hands like it was some sort of sacred object. The light was on, casting that golden spiral on the pavement beneath me, and there were people gathered around. They stood in silence, 10, maybe 12 of them, watching me. Their eyes were glowing just like mine had, the same dim fire flickering behind glassy dead stares. One of them stepped forward and whispered, "You're the seventh." Then they all turned and walked away, disappearing into the dark like they were never there. I ran back upstairs and locked myself inside, but that didn't stop the dreams. They became more vivid, more real. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the forest, standing before the cabin. Except now it was different, bigger, pulsing, alive. The trees were bending toward it. The sky above it wasn't a sky at all, but a swirling black void, like a hole had been punched through the fabric of reality. Inside, the man was gone. Only the chair remained and the mirror, but now there were dozens of lamps, hundreds, all glowing, all pointed at the mirror, and I could see faces inside it from every angle, twisting, screaming, grinning. I woke up sweating, heart racing, fingers twitching like they were still trying to reach through the glass. I began researching symbols, spirals, mythology, occult traditions, ancient religions. Every culture had some version of it, the eye that sees through time, the God who watches through mirrors, the spiral that leads inward. And always the same warning: do not gaze too long, do not let it gaze back. But it was too late for warnings. I'd already seen it. I'd already let it in. The spiral was under my skin now. I could feel it when I touched my chest, like a brand that hadn't healed. It pulsed with rhythm, not my heartbeat. Something slower, older. I don't know what day it is anymore. I don't know if I'm awake or dreaming. Every screen I look at shows my reflection now, but always a second behind, like it's waiting for something, watching me for the right moment to act. Sometimes I hear laughter when I speak. Sometimes I hear someone else speaking through my voice. I saw my mother on the news last night. She died 10 years ago, but there she was, walking through a crowd in a city halfway across the country, staring into the camera like she knew I'd be watching. My phone rang and her name appeared. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The spiral had opened something, and now reality is fraying around me. The veil between dimensions, between selves, is almost gone. I don't know what I am anymore. A man, a vessel, a reflection of a reflection. All I know is this: the spiral doesn't end. It only leads deeper, and somewhere at the center, something is waiting. Something that remembers me. Something that has always been watching, and it wants me to come home. I don't remember exactly when I woke up, but when I opened my eyes, the world had changed again, and I was no longer sure if I was dreaming or still trapped in the same waking nightmare that began the moment I looked into that mirror. The lamp was still on, casting that slow, swirling golden spiral on the ceiling, but the light wasn't steady anymore. It pulsed like a heartbeat, like it was alive and watching me, like it was waiting for something. The air felt heavier than it should have, thick with a silence that vibrated in my bones. And the walls around me, once dull and painted yellow, now shimmered faintly, undulating as if they were breathing in sync with the spiral above. My belongings were all gone. No books, no phone, no pictures on the wall, just the empty echoes of familiarity warped into something unrecognizable. I got up, stumbled over to the kitchen, and saw that the clock on the wall was spinning backwards, its hands twitching like insect legs, moving not in seconds but in spasms of time that made my stomach churn. I reached for my phone, but when I opened my contacts, every name had been replaced by symbols I didn't understand. Strange curving lines and sharp angles that seemed ancient and mathematical all at once, like equations meant to be sung rather than solved. I dialed one at random, not expecting anyone to answer, and what came through wasn't a voice, but a layered chorus of whispers that bled through the speakers like wind through dry leaves, and somewhere buried beneath it all was my own voice, repeating things I'd said years ago, things I'd forgotten, things I wish I hadn't said. I dropped the phone, and it shattered into pieces that dissolved into ash before they hit the floor. I looked around for the mirror, that cursed object, but it was gone too, replaced by a window where no window had ever been before. Through it I could see snow falling in slow motion over the cabin, the same one I'd left behind. But this time it was different, older, sunken into the earth like it had been waiting centuries for me to return, and its roof was covered in frost, the windows glowing with that same spiral light that haunted my ceiling. I blinked, and suddenly I was there, standing outside the cabin in the snow, barefoot and breathless, the air too still to be natural. The trees around me were twisted into unnatural shapes, their branches forming spirals, 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 over and over, as if the forest itself had been infected with whatever madness had taken root inside me. I pushed the door open and walked into the cabin, expecting wood and dust and silence, but instead I found my apartment again, perfectly recreated, but wrong in every detail. The furniture was the same, but the materials were off, too smooth, too reflective, like they had been grown rather than built. The air smelled like copper and damp soil. On the far side of the room, a version of myself sat slouched in the old wooden chair, older and thinner and impossibly pale, like someone who had spent years in darkness. He looked up with hollow eyes, raised a trembling hand, and held out a shard of the mirror, stained with blood. I didn't want to take it, but my hand moved anyway, and the moment I touched the shard, everything collapsed. The floor cracked open beneath me and I fell, not down but through, tumbling into layer after layer of memories that weren't mine, but felt like they belonged to me. I saw myself in other times, other places, dying in wars I never studied, crying in bedrooms I never lived in, running through corridors that loop back on themselves like the inside of a maze. Each life ended the same way, with the spiral etched into a wall, or a tree, or my own skin. When I finally stopped falling, I landed on the floor of my apartment again, except this time the walls were blackened, scorched as if by fire, and in place of the mirror was a swirling golden portal that pulsed with light and sound and thought. From within it, I could hear a hum that wasn't sound, but intent, like a voice without language calling out, not with words but with gravity. The spiral inside me responded, pulling me forward even as I screamed silently in protest. And I knew then that I was no longer in control, that I had never been in control, that the moment I touched that mirror in the woods, something ancient and patient had found me. As I stepped toward the portal, I caught one final glimpse of my reflection, not in a mirror, but in the golden surface of the vortex. And what I saw wasn't me. It was something wearing me, something ancient and endless and hungry, and it smiled as if to welcome me home. I stepped through, and the world folded shut behind me like a book snapping closed, and somewhere in the dark beyond thought, the spiral turned once more, ready for the next reader. I don't remember how long I've been here now, in this place where time doesn't pass the way it should, where the concept of day and night has dissolved into a ceaseless, oppressive twilight that presses against my skull like a scream just waiting to burst. I've tried to keep track, marking the walls with scratches, counting meals, blinking to a rhythm I created in my mind just to preserve some semblance of order. But it's no use. Days blend into nights, dreams into memories, and nothing feels real anymore. The apartment has shifted again. The kitchen has no door, only a smooth wall that hums when I press my ear to it. And the humming has started to form patterns, words almost, syllables in a language I can almost understand, if I listen long enough. But every time I do, blood leaks from my nose, and a deep pressure forms behind my eyes, like something inside me is waking up or breaking. The spiral on the ceiling has multiplied. There are now 5 of them, turning in opposite directions, each one with its own rhythm, and sometimes they sync for a second, a moment of perfect, terrifying silence. And I swear in those moments the walls breathe outwards like lungs. The reflection in the window is no longer mine. It moves when I don't, blinks slower than I do, and smiles even when I'm frozen in fear. I tried to destroy the mirror shard the pale version of me gave me, but every time I break it, it returns to the table where I sleep, whole and gleaming, showing images of places I haven't seen, but somehow know intimately. Cities covered in vines, oceans turned to black tar, people walking backward through empty streets beneath skies that pulse with a sickly green light. I saw myself there once, walking calmly through it all, smiling as though I belonged. I screamed and slammed the shard against the floor again and again, but it didn't shatter. It sang, a low, metallic tone that echoed through the walls until they wept red. I've stopped using the lights now. They flicker in patterns that hypnotize me, pull me deeper into that humming language. And I know if I stare too long, I won't come back. I sleep with the lights off, if I sleep at all, but even in the dark, the spirals remain, glowing faintly with that golden light, spinning behind my eyelids like they've taken root in my mind. Sometimes I hear footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate, always stopping just outside my door. I wait, heart pounding, breath held, but they never knock. I used to look through the peephole, but the last time I did, I saw myself on the other side, staring back with eyes completely black. And I knew then that if I opened the door, I would let something in that could never leave. I haven't left this apartment since. I can't. The door no longer opens. I tried breaking the windows, but outside is just more apartment. Infinitely repeating versions of this same room, slightly different, like a maze designed by a god who's forgotten what sanity looks like. I once tried writing a letter, something to explain, to document, to hold on to reason. But when I read it back, the words were all spirals, coiling lines etched in a script that moved when I blinked, as if the paper were alive and watching. I don't know who I am anymore. I'm not even sure I'm still human. My thoughts are not my own. Sometimes I hear them before I think them, like someone else is feeding them to me, planting them like seeds in soil that's already cracked and broken. I think something is coming. No, not coming. Something is already here, and it's wearing this place like a skin, like a mask stretched over reality, waiting for me to forget who I used to be. And the worst part? I think I already have. There's no more doubt in my mind. This place is not an apartment, not a room, not a building that exists in any ordinary sense. It is a trap, a living organism that breathes and shifts and feeds off memory, bending reality around me like a spider pulling silk tight around a fly. The walls pulse now subtly, as if mimicking a heartbeat, too slow, too deep, like the beat of something ancient buried miles beneath the earth and slowly waking up. Last night, or what I assume was night, I found a door I don't remember seeing before. It was small, no taller than my waist, hidden behind the peeling wallpaper that curled like skin. I crawled through it, dragging myself across the cold floor into a narrow tunnel lined with mirrors, each one reflecting not my face, but scenes from places I don't recognize. A burning church full of empty pews and whispering shadows, a child standing motionless in the middle of a cornfield under a sky cracked open with red lightning, a man, me, kneeling in a bathroom full of blood, eyes hollow, mouth sewn shut with golden thread. I kept moving because going back was no longer an option, and eventually I emerged into another version of the apartment. Identical, but somehow wrong in microscopic ways. The couch faced the opposite wall, the sink dripped black liquid, and the photo on the nightstand was of a woman I've never met smiling beside me while my eyes were scratched out. I screamed, not out of fear, but because my mouth suddenly filled with soil, dry and bitter, like it had been shoveled into me. I clawed it out, choking, coughing up roots, and something wriggled between my teeth before slithering away beneath the floorboards. I haven't seen it since, but I hear it moving, watching. I haven't eaten in what must be days, but I'm not hungry anymore. The hunger was replaced with something else, a gnawing itch beneath my skin, especially around my spine, like something is growing there, unfolding slowly, curling around my bones. I catch glimpses of it in the reflection, just a flicker, a brief distortion in the mirror, like tendrils made of shadow, twitching in rhythm with my heartbeat. I tried to scream again, to make it stop, to wake up, but the apartment absorbed the sound, swallowing it like it was feeding on my fear. The light bulbs melted into waxy drips that wrote symbols on the wall when they cooled, runes that glowed faintly and made the air hum with pressure, like my head was going to explode. And still that spiral on the ceiling turns, slow and patient, dragging my thoughts into its center like a whirlpool. I see it in my dreams now, corrupted places, other worlds stitched together with sinew and teeth, all spiraling inward toward a single point of light that pulses with a consciousness far beyond comprehension. It wants me to understand it, to give in, to let go of myself, my body, my history, everything I was before I stepped into this apartment. And I'm starting to agree. There's a comfort and surrender in letting the spiral take over, in becoming part of something larger, something eternal, something that cannot die because it was never alive in the first place. I don't know how much longer I can resist. I don't know if I even want to anymore. Maybe I was never meant to escape. Maybe this place isn't a trap, it's a rebirth. And maybe I'm not the first. The walls are full of whispers now, voices that sound like mine, layered and overlapping, speaking in tongues that twist the mind. I think they were people once. I think they lived here. I think I'm becoming one of them. The deeper I sink into this living nightmare, the more I realize that the apartment itself is a prison of fractured realities, stitched together by some ancient malevolent force that feeds not on flesh or blood, but on time and identity. Every moment I spend here feels like 1,000 years unraveling simultaneously, memories slipping through my fingers like sand, my sense of self disintegrating into the whispering walls that mock and mimic me with voices that are both mine and not mine. And the shadows that crawl just beyond the edge of sight grow bolder, forming shapes that pulse and breathe as if alive, watching me with eyes that gleam like cold stars. I have discovered hidden chambers behind false walls filled with relics from forgotten lives, tattered photographs, broken toys, journals with pages inked in indecipherable symbols, each item pulsing with a faint, unnatural energy that seeps into my skin and poisons my thoughts. I am haunted by visions of people long lost, trapped in looping nightmares where they scream silently, while the spiral on the ceiling twists endlessly above them, pulling their souls into oblivion. Time here is a sick joke, an endless cycle where day and night lose meaning, and I find myself awake in the void between moments, unable to distinguish reality from hallucination, with the apartment's breathing becoming my own, a slow, rhythmic pulse that synchronizes with the creeping dread in my chest, suffocating me slowly. The hunger for normalcy and freedom war with the seductive promise whispered in the corners of the rooms. A promise of escape if only I surrender fully to the spiral's embrace, to the dark promise that lies beneath the floorboards where something writhes and waits, ancient and hungry, a seed planted in my soul that grows with every passing second, twisting my mind and body until I am unrecognizable even to myself. I feel myself slipping, the walls closing in tighter, the air thickening with despair as the apartment becomes a labyrinthine nightmare of infinite hallways and locked doors, each one a fragment of a forgotten past or a possible future. And the voices grow louder, chanting in a language older than humanity, calling me home to a place that doesn't exist except in the shadows of this hellish space. I don't know if I am alive or dead, if I am dreaming or awake, but the one certainty that terrifies me most is that the apartment is alive, and it has claimed me as its own, weaving my story into its endless spiral, erasing my name, and replacing it with a silence so deep it echoes like a scream trapped in the void. And somewhere, beyond the shifting walls and the endless reflections that show what should not be seen, I feel the presence of others like me, lost souls caught in the same spiral, their fates entwined with mine, waiting for a release that may never come, while the apartment waits patiently for the final piece of the puzzle, my complete surrender, the moment when I cease to resist and become one with the darkness that breathes and dreams beneath the peeling wallpaper and the creaking floorboards, forever trapped in the spiral's eternal dance. As the days blurred into nights without distinction, I found myself losing all grip on reality, the apartment's malevolent presence wrapping tighter around my mind like a suffocating shroud. Every shadow seemed to stretch longer, every whisper turned into a chant, and the walls began to breathe with an unnatural rhythm that synchronized with the pounding of my heart. While outside, the city's usual chaos faded into a distant, muffled hum, as if the building itself was a vortex drawing me deeper into its cursed core, where time unraveled and space folded into impossible shapes. I started to see things that defied explanation. Faces appearing in the windows where none should be, reflections that lingered too long, and fleeting glimpses of movement behind the curtains, though I knew no one could be there. The lamp's eerie glow became a sickly comfort, a beacon in the dark that both beckoned and threatened, and I felt the pull of something ancient and hungry, whispering promises of release, but only if I surrendered fully. Desperation clawed at my sanity as I scoured the apartment for answers, uncovering old newspaper clippings hidden behind loose wallpaper that spoke of disappearances and tragedies tied to this very building. Stories of tenants who vanished without a trace, their last known moments shrouded in mystery and terror. My phone, once a lifeline, betrayed me with static calls and cryptic messages that seemed written in a language meant to unnerve and ensnare. My dreams, once nightmares, evolved into waking hallucinations, blurring the line between what was real and what was conjured by the apartment's sinister will. I began to hear footsteps pacing just beyond the door, faint voices calling my name in tones both loving and cruel, and the figure from the window started to appear in every reflective surface, closer and closer until I felt its cold breath on my neck. The more I resisted, the stronger the apartment's grip grew, twisting the rooms into endless corridors of despair, forcing me to confront the darkness not just around me, but within me, a darkness I never knew I carried until now. And yet, in the heart of this spiraling madness, a fragile spark of hope flickered, a stubborn will to break free from the cycle and reclaim my shattered soul before the apartment could claim it forever. But every attempt to escape only deepened the spiral, tightening the noose until I wasn't sure if I was the hunter or the prey, trapped in a nightmare without end, where the only certainty was that the apartment across the street never truly turned off its lights, and neither would I. Not until I uncovered the truth buried beneath the layers of time, madness, and death. After weeks trapped in the relentless grip of that cursed apartment, the boundaries between reality and nightmare had dissolved completely, leaving me a hollow shell haunted by shadows and whispers that clung to my skin like cold smoke. But on that final night, something shifted. Whether it was courage or madness, I can't say. As I decided to confront the darkness head on, armed only with a flashlight and a fierce determination to end the torment that had consumed my life. I crossed the threshold into the apartment across the street once more, the air thick with decay and something far worse. The lamp's sickly glow casting grotesque shapes that danced on the walls like restless spirits. I moved toward the window where the figure always appeared, and as I reached out, a sudden surge of cold swept through me. A voice, both distant and piercing, whispered, "Leave or stay forever." But I refused to back down, demanding the truth that had been hidden for so long. The apartment seemed to pulse, walls bending and warping until I was no longer certain if I was inside or outside, past or present, alive or dead. Then the figure emerged fully, no longer just a shadow or a flicker, but a person, a woman trapped between worlds, her eyes filled with sorrow and rage, telling me her story of betrayal, loss, and a curse that bound her spirit to this place, feeding off the fear and isolation of those who looked too long at the light. Understanding that to free her and myself, I had to break the cycle by extinguishing the lamp that held her captive. I seized it, feeling its pulse slow under my grip, the room trembling as if protesting the end of its power. With a final burst of strength, I smashed the lamp against the wall, and the light snapped out like a dying star, plunging the apartment into absolute darkness. Silence followed, heavy and complete, until a warmth spread through the space, lifting the oppressive weight that had clung to me for so long. I stumbled back outside, gasping for breath, and as dawn broke over the city, I looked across the street to see the apartment's windows, dark, empty, finally at peace. The figure was gone. Her story ended. The curse lifted. And though the scars remained in my mind and heart, I knew I had survived the darkness. I moved out soon after, leaving behind the haunted building and its secrets. But the experience changed me forever. A reminder that some places hold shadows, not just in their corners, but in the stories they refuse to let go. And that sometimes, to find the light, we must face the deepest darkness within ourselves and in the world around us.